With the Grand Magic Festival having concluded, and Will having defeated Julius for the pride of the dwarves, regular day-to-day life resumes for Will Serfort. But for how long? Well, let's find out in episode 8 of Wistoria Wand and Sword, called Shall We Date? As episode 8 opens, we find ourselves on Slumlin Street, located on the outskirts of Urbis Regarden. This is the area where the dwarves come to drink after working in the mines. On Slumlin Street, a celebration can be heard inside of Gina's Tavern, where the dwarves, alongside Will and his school friends, celebrate Will for beating Julius and defending the honor of the dwarves. After all of the fighting at the Grand Magic Festival, it's honestly just nice to see Will, his friends, and the dwarves able to relax. Professor Werkner, who's also present at Will's celebration, begins to thank the dwarves throughout the tavern for watching over Will and taking such good care of him. But the dwarves tell Professor Werkner that he can keep his thanks and lets him know through raised pints that they appreciate having Will around. As the party winds down, Will can be seen having a drink with Mr. Donan, a dwarf that's really close with Will. As the two continue to celebrate together, Mr. Donan asks Will if he's gotten any news from the tower, since Will's performance at the Grand Magic Festival must have stood out to them. But it's at this point that we realize that Colette is also at the table, and she explains that their team has not heard anything from the tower, partially because they lost the event, but also due to Scion's behavior at the festival, with him turning on his own team. Rosti, joining the group and providing Will with a plate of food, asks Will about Scion, wondering if he was invited to the festivities at Gina's Tavern. But Will explains that Scion refused the invite. On the opposite end of the spectrum, however, as Mr. Donan speaks, we can see Julius in the kitchen washing dishes as penance for disrespecting the dwarves and losing his battle to Will. As Julius whines, asking why he's forced to do manual labor, Gina lets Julius know that for dwarves, the way to repay a person is through actions. Julius is clearly frustrated by this, along with the fact that he ended up not getting scouted at the Grand Magic Festival due to losing to Will. As Julius sulks, we head back to the table where Colette and Professor Werkner are talking about Will and his accomplishments at the festival. Professor Werkner is concerned at how Will will be treated when he returns to school, since most at Regard Magical Academy view Will as a worthless no talent and did not expect such a showing from him at the Grand Magic Festival. Colette feels like since Will had such an amazing showing during the Crown Attack event, he'll end up being liked more by the students at the school. But Professor Werkner is not as confident. Naturally, from here, we're taken to Regard Magical Academy, where two unknown students are discussing starting a party to go into the dungeon, and how a dungeon crawl would be easy to complete if they somehow had one of the top 3 students in their party. At the same time, another pair of students approach Will and Colette, who happen to be walking down the hall. Because the students approaching Will have always been mean to him, you can tell that they do not know how to approach Will. However, the two students suggest to Will that he should join their party to head into the dungeon together. As Will and Colette stare at these two students, utterly confused by the request, one of the boys expresses that Will had done a great job at the Grand Magic Festival, and with them teaming up, they could clear the dungeon rather quickly. Just as these two students finish their pitch to Will, we find that 3 female students are standing right behind them, irritated since they plan to ask Will to join them in the dungeon as well. The two groups of students begin to argue, and as they do, a third set of students walk up behind Will, excited to tell him how they thought he did at the Grand Magic Festival, and trying to rope Will in as their partner as well. As the original students notice the newcomers, they all begin to surround Will, who has never had this level of attention and seems pretty overwhelmed. Colette, having been kind of nudged off to the side, but wanting to protect Will from all of this attention, jumps in front of Will, simultaneously shaming the other students for wanting to take advantage of Will. But as it turns out, and completely contradictory to what I said previously about Will probably being overwhelmed, When Colette turns to Will, he's actually super excited to be getting all of this attention and is so happy that people actually want him on their teams. Colette is caught completely off guard by this reaction from Will, and as the other students continue to get closer to Will, attempting to sway him to their side, Colette gets flustered and grabs Will, letting all of the surrounding students know that Will cannot join them because Colette and Will be going shopping tomorrow. Later that night, Colette can be found in her dorm room, completely mortified at the fact that she basically told her classmates that she and Will are going on a date. Not helping the situation at all, Colette's roommate, Rose, either Prennitt or Pre-Night, I'm not sure, enters the dorm room, asking Colette about her upcoming date with Will. As Colette turns more red by the second, Rose hands her a cup and lets Colette know that she thinks it's a good thing that Colette gets to spend some time alone with Will. With Colette and Rose continuing to talk in their dorm, we're taken to Will's living quarters. In his room, Will can be seen studying, and his roommate Rosti is reading. Rosti asks Will if he's studying up to go into the dungeon, but Will says that he'll actually be going shopping tomorrow. Will thinks that even though he was somewhat peer pressured into going shopping, it's still a good idea to stock up for supplies for the upcoming praxis exam. Rosti continues to press Will for information, and Will lets Rosti know that he'll be going shopping with Colette, causing Rosti to give somewhat of an annoyed grin to Will. We aren't given time to put too much thought into why Rosti looked at Will that way, as the focus then changes, and it's the next day, and the scene has shifted to St. Viola Square, the square in the center of Urbis Regarden, the capital of magic. We find Colette directly under St. Viola's statue in the center of the square, where she's straightening her dress and keeping an eye out for Will. Within moments, Will appears with Kiki, his familiar, in tow. Will greets Colette, telling her that the way that she looks has his heart racing, and Colette loses her composure. She regains it quickly, though, and goes to respond to Will, but before she can, a voice calls out to them, and when they both look over, it turns out to be Rosti, Will's roommate, who has decided to join them for the day. Colette, having very little interaction with Rosti up to this point, or perhaps playing dumb, asks Rosti if they know him, and Rosti politely introduces himself. Colette is still confused by what's happening, so Will lets her know that Rosti invited himself along to join them, and Will was okay with that. Rosti then proceeds to walk up to Will, steps in between Will and Colette, and grabs Will's hand. Will tells Rosti not to be so pushy, but he does continue to hold Rosti's hand as they walk away, making Colette flustered, but for a completely different reason. Colette's mind starts to reel as she wonders why dear friends and roommates would be holding hands. As she's trying to figure it all out though, Rosti turns around and sticks his tongue out at Colette, causing Colette to internally spiral. Nonetheless, the three begin their shopping journey together. But it's like every time Colette tries to help Will, or come to Will with something he might like, Rosti finds a way to jump in between them and approach Will first. Whether it was in the library, shopping for clothes, going to lunch or a magic shop, or even just getting ice cream, Rosti managed to hold on to Will all day and keep Colette at a distance. It got so bad that Colette was almost brought to tears and began to interrogate Will about Rosti, suspicious of what their relationship might be. Will tries to calm Colette, letting her know that he realizes that Rosti is overly affectionate, but he's been that way since they very first met. Before the conversation could continue though, Rosti pops up with drinks for both Will and Colette and sits between them. As tensions on the bench between Rosti and Colette escalate, Rosti reminds Will that he wanted to get his sword maintenance and suggests Will go and do that, and he and Colette will catch up with Will later. Will is hesitant to leave the pair, but Colette agrees with Rosti, so Will gets up to leave. The moment that Will is out of sight, Colette can't help herself. She immediately turns to Rosti and asks if he likes Will. Rosti promptly stands up and goes to lean over in front of Colette, getting as close to her face as possible. Rossi then makes it clear to Colette that he is the one who loves Will the most in the world, before telling Colette that he believes Will loves him more than he loves Colette. Colette, highly upset, stands up to Rossi, letting him know that she and Will used to hug all the time. But Rossi comes back saying he gets to see Will when they bathe together. Rossi and Colette continue to go back and forth about who gets more of Will's affection, and as they do, the setting shifts to Will walking down an alley with Kiki on his head. As Will wonders what's going on with his friends, Lihanna Owenshouse, one of the top 3 students at Regarden Magical Academy, appears and calls out to Will. It is in this moment that we are reminded that Lihanna Owenshouse, also known as Miss Perfect, is known as such because she's gained every credit in writing, spell work, and praxis. She's thought of very highly throughout the academy. Lihanna asks Will for a moment of his time before leading him to a building called Tea House Night. Once inside, Will finds himself face to face with not only Lihanna, but the other top 2 students at Regarden, Wignall the Wonder Elf and Julius the Ice Wielder, along with Scion the Fire Wielder. Before Will has a chance to open his mouth, Lihanna begins to explain that it's the last term of their final year and the all-student praxis exam is coming up. She wants the 5 of them, herself, Will, Wignall, Julius, and Scion, to form a party and take on the dungeon. As Will stands at the room's entrance in complete shock, Scion and Julius both take this opportunity to threaten Will, who begins to wonder why Lihanna even brought him here. But Lihanna, clueless to the energy in the room, asks Will if he will agree. In the meantime, Scion, who has lost none of his edge, goes to grip Will up by his shirt, at which point Wignall the Wonder Elf casts illusion magic Floria to get everyone's attention. As a side note, illusion magic is a specific magic to elves and allows them to conjure all sorts of things. Wignall suggests that everyone calm down and hear Lihanna out, and Lihanna begins by once again asking Will to join them, noting that he has skills that they as magic users do not have that would be helpful in the dungeon. Julius counters Lihanna's argument, calling Will trash, and Scion agrees with him. Wignall also joins into the conversation, but only to tell Julius and Scion that they're being prideful, and they're both bitter losers since both of them could not defeat Will. Wignall goes on to explain that the only person he respects in that room is Lihanna, and he sees value in Will because she does. Once Wignall is done shutting Scion and Julius down, Lihanna continues to speak, letting everyone in the room know that she wants to be unmatched when the time comes for her to ascend the tower. Lihanna makes it very clear that her entire goal around gathering this team is to build her own standing and seek greater renown. Will, noting that Lihanna is already top of their class, asks why she wants to put so much into the dungeon raid, but Lihanna lets him know that all students that remain at the school are considered leftovers. And even though in this room, outside of Will, everyone has high marks, they are still considered inferior mages. This does not sit well with Lihanna, as her ultimate goal is to become a Magiavander. Lihanna then asks everyone who's willing to join her cause to grab the coin in front of them and place it in the cup in the center of the table to signify their intent to team up. Wignall immediately agrees, with Julius following directly behind him. Scion quietly joins after Julius, but as we see Will's face, there's a murmur of hesitation as he holds his coin. However, before we get Will's answer, we're taken back to Rossi and Colette, looking around in the town square before spotting Will in the distance. The two check in with Will to make sure he's okay since he's been missing for a while, and Will responds by letting them know that he has just joined a party led by Lihanna. The following day, in Professor Werkner's classroom, Werkner is advising his students that they have 10 days before the all-student praxis takes place, and because of this, for a limited time, floors 7 through 10 of the dungeon will be opened. Werkner continues on by explaining to his students that the praxis exam is the only time a student can gain over 1,000 credits at once, and that defeating a floor keeper will gain you more points in one shot than defeating a regular monster. Professor Edward continues on with Werkner's explanation as the students make it to him, advising all of the students that they can and do die during praxis, with 2 students being lost last year. Edward warns the students to protect themselves before the scene cuts over to the 7th floor base camp by the communications path on the 6th floor of the dungeon. At this point, it seems like we're at the starting point of the praxis exam, so 10 days have passed, and Colette has decided to join Lihana's team as well, but without asking. Lihana calls out Colette, asking why she's there since she was not asked to join them. But Colette is staunch in her desire to be with Will, and lets Lihana know that where he goes, Colette goes as well. We then see Rosti, also in the dungeon. But because he is an artificer, Rosti cannot leave base camp. Will thanks Rosti for all of the magical items that he made Will for him to take into the dungeon before he and Colette take off to meet with the rest of their class. As everyone stands ready for the praxis to begin, Professor Edward goes over the guidelines, letting everyone know that this is a week-long, field-intensive exam, and it's a survival exercise. And from here, the praxis exam begins. This is where episode 8 of Wistoria 1 and Sword ends. This was definitely an episode to set us up for everything that's supposed to be coming in the praxis exam. It was a much slower episode than the ones that came out before it, but I enjoy a bit of a slower episode sometimes. The slower episodes get you to kind of a nice baseline so that when things really start to get crazy, you feel the heightened tension. And for me, my favorite part about this episode was watching everybody love up on Will. After so many episodes and so many flashbacks, seeing him deep in sadness and depression, it's really nice to see his talent being recognized. I cannot wait to see what Will does in the dungeons during the praxis. But what did you think about the episode? Do you think Lihana's team is going to make it through the dungeon with no problems? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this recap, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you all for episode 9.